I'm joined by Rebecca McDonald, Head of Policy at Policy in Practice. Good afternoon to you, Rebecca.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
This was a tough political win for those in favour of scrapping it, wasn't it?
It was. I think it was a really big debate because it is, as you said, it's a costly policy change. It does cost a lot of money, but on the other hand, it's an incredibly effective way to pull children out of poverty. Children for whom, it's nothing to do with them, whether they're in a small or a large family, and yet this policy has been affecting the ability of their family to put food on the table, or to keep their home warm over winter. So I think, there's a collection of benefit and pension changes happening this month, as you said. But this, I would say, is one of the most impactful changes which is happening.
Debate is fine. What about the quality of the debate? Because there are those who are resistant to changes to the welfare state that we have. I'm talking about the broader welfare state here, not just the child benefit cap. And there are those who are saying we should slash and burn an awful lot of it.
Yes, I mean, there's difficult choices to be made, and it very much depends on, as you said, the size of the welfare state that you think is the right one, who should receive support and how much they should receive. And I think one of the things that it's highlighted throughout the debate is the complexity that still exists within the benefit system, and how much financial support you receive very much can depend on your family circumstances. So if we step back and we look at the changes happening this month, we see that for those receiving universal credit, they're having an above inflation increase in their income. Now, that's really positive. That's also happening, as you said, for those who receive the state pension. That's a 4.8% increase for them. And then for the larger families who've been affected by the 2-child limit, many of those will see a really significant boost in their incomes. However, there are some other things going on which make this more complex. So, for example, for some families who are having the 2-child limit lifted, they are actually going to become benefit capped by a second benefit cap, which exists, which is the one that kind of caps overall benefits amounts of families receive. So we've looked at the impact of this, and we see that 1 in 10 of the families who are having the benefit cap, the 2-child limit benefit cap lifted from them, won't actually gain at all financially because they are capped in another way.
How many? 1 in 5, did you say?
1 in 5 families won't gain fully from the lifting of the 2-child benefit cap. But for 1 in 10 families, they won't gain at all because they are already capped and they're already at that cap in terms of what they're receiving. And I think that's really important to remember, because while overall this is a very impactful policy change that will pull many children out of poverty over the years to come, there are going to be some families for whom this doesn't actually make any difference.
Remind me, if you would, of the... it's a gap in my knowledge. Remind me of the overall benefit cap scenario and who that affects.
Yeah, of course. So this isn't a cap on the overall amount of benefits that a family can receive. The cap itself ranges from 15,000 to about 25,000, depending on your circumstances, say whether you have children, whether you're a couple, whether you're a single person. And it affects primarily people who are out of work, or more specifically, people who work less than 16 hours on the minimum wage. So it's lower earners or families who are out of work. And sometimes that can be some of those who are the most worse off as a result. You're exempt from the benefit cap, of course, if you or someone in your family has a disability, or you earn over that limit. So you work more than 16 hours a week on the minimum wage.
Although there are people with disabilities or parents of people with disabilities expressing their concern today about the changes to some of their benefits that will leave them out of pocket or with less.
Yeah, so I think you're referring to one of the other changes that's happening this month, which is around the health element of universal credit. Yeah. And this is for those people for whom their health condition or their disability affects their ability to either work or to, say, prepare for work or apply for jobs. And there's quite a significant change that's taking place with the income that those people receive. And that is that the amount of money they receive each month will be halved. So instead of receiving £400 a month, they'll be receiving £200 a month, with the important caveat that if you have a very severe condition or it's a lifelong condition, for example, a terminal illness, then you will continue to receive £400 a month. But again, I think this change highlights the complexity of the system, because there is now going to be a very strange situation where if you applied for this part of universal credit last month, you will continue to receive £400 a month. Whereas if you have another person who claims
same condition.
Exact same condition, who claims next week, they will only receive £200 a month. So there is going to be a kind of additional complexity. And I would encourage anyone in this who's affected by this, or just more broadly, who's a little bit unsure about the financial support they might be able to receive, I would encourage them to log on to a benefits calculator, because that can very clearly set out exactly what financial support you may or may not be entitled to based on your situations. And as as our discussion shows, it can be quite complex.
And if they don't know how to use the benefits calculator, don't have easy access to computers, who would be their best person to either go and see or call?
I think Citizens Advice is always a good place to contact. Yeah. There will be other more local community organisations where you could get in-person support and talk to someone in person. But I think Citizens Advice is a great place to start. And then, as you say, if you do have access to the internet, there are lots of different websites available and benefits calculators that can help you.
And we often hear, as part of this conversation, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it, politicians often talk about work being the real way out of poverty, the best way out of poverty. And, that makes perfect sense as a statement. And yet we've seen the example I began describing, Tracy, mother of 5, working full time, doing a bit of extra work on the side as well in her local pub, not being able to lift herself and her family out of poverty. So it isn't a straightforward equation, is it? Work equals everything okay?
No, of course not. And, there's a few reasons for that. One is that, of course, work doesn't necessarily, the pay you get from your work doesn't necessarily increase in proportion with the cost of living for your family. So, for example, if you live in a particularly expensive area, say, particularly expensive area of London, or your cost of living is higher because someone in your family has a health condition that means you need your home to be really warm, or you have a lot of children. These things increase your cost of living, but your work won't necessarily pay you more as a result. And that kind of imbalance can be difficult.
And I think housing costs have to be taken into account here, don't they? Because I remember asking Paul Johnson of the IFS some years ago now how my parents were able to raise 7 kids in the 60s and 70s on one salary that never really went much into double figures. How is that possible then? And they owned their own home eventually. It took about 12 years to save for it, but they did it. And his answer was so simple. He just said the relationship between wages and housing costs. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the headline reason.
It has changed very much significantly. The ratio between those two things is just, completely different than it was many decades ago. There's also another change I think that's important to highlight, which is that there's been quite a big shift in between or in terms of how many people are in social housing and council housing versus previous decades. And actually, there's been a big shift away from social housing and towards private rent. And actually, that links to another change that's happening this month, or lack of change, because the amount that people receive, within universal credit towards private rental and the housing costs, it's been frozen this year, and it's been frozen for many previous years as well. And this means that it's diverging yet more this year from the actual cost of private renting.
And the private landlords, when we talk about this on air, they argue, and I kind of logically can see their point, they argue covering my costs as the owner of this property is getting tougher and tougher and tougher because of the cost of living, because of fuel, because of mortgage rates and the like. Therefore, I have to increase the private rent. The council says, sorry, that's our cap. And then the renter is left in facing homelessness. I mean, nobody is winning there, are they?
Yeah, exactly. It's a really difficult position for many people in the private rented sector.
Because of the lack of social housing.
Well, the change, the increase in the number of people who are in the private rental sector and are on a low income is due to that shift away from social housing. And it means that more people are in that sector and affected by this. And as you say, it is a driver of homelessness at the moment, because private rents are, in some places in the country, are rising rapidly.
Well, you've painted a picture for us, Rebecca. Thank you. That was what I was looking for. So thanks very much indeed, Rebecca McDonald, Head of Policy at Policy in Practice.